They mocked a veteran for inheriting a worthless treehouse. Then its $4 million secret emerged. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's incredible story. There was a time when Michael Thompson never imagined he would be the subject of ridicule in his own hometown. A decorated war veteran, Michael had seen the worst the world had to offer, and yet, nothing had prepared him for the scorn he would face when he inherited a rundown treehouse. But what began as a joke among the townspeople would soon turn into a story that no one could have predicted. Michael had always been a quiet man. After serving in the military, he had returned to his small hometown in the northern part of Maine, hoping to live out his days in peace. The scars from his time in the service ran deeper than the ones that were visible. But life had a way of throwing curveballs, and when his late uncle, a man Michael had barely known, left him a property in his will, he never thought much of it. The estate was a treehouse, perched high in the woods, surrounded by nothing but trees, silence, and the whispers of a forgotten past. At first glance, it seemed like a joke. A decrepit structure, leaning precariously against a massive oak, with boards missing from the floor, the roof sagging under the weight of time and neglect. Neighbors had a good laugh when the news spread. "What's he going to do with that thing?" they would chuckle. "Isn't he better off without it?" It was the kind of property no one in their right mind would want, a worthless relic of someone's youthful dreams. And yet, Michael felt something stir inside him as he stared at the treehouse. Perhaps it was the memory of his uncle, or maybe it was just the soldier in him, never backing down from a challenge. Michael wasn't one to shy away from hard work. He decided to make the best of it, thinking it might provide a quiet retreat, a place to escape the noise of the world. As he climbed up to inspect the treehouse, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this place than met the eye. The inside smelled of old wood and mildew, but something about it felt strangely inviting. It wasn't much, but for Michael, it represented a new beginning, a chance to start over. For weeks, he worked on the treehouse, patching holes, replacing beams, and cleaning out the layers of dust and cobwebs. But one rainy afternoon, as he was clearing out an old chest in the corner, Michael stumbled upon something that stopped him dead in his tracks. Hidden underneath a pile of rotting blankets was a small, locked box. It was a plain wooden box, nothing remarkable at first glance, but something about the way it was buried in the corner caught his attention. After carefully prying it open, Michael found a set of old documents and a series of photographs that seemed out of place. The photographs were black and white, depicting scenes of a wealthy family, their lives filled with elegance and luxury. But it was the letters inside the box that made Michael's heart race. The letters spoke of a secret fortune, one tied to the very treehouse he had inherited. The property, it seemed, was once part of a much larger estate owned by a family with connections to rare collectibles, priceless artifacts, and a hidden treasure that had been lost to time. As Michael read through the documents, he realized that his inheritance was far more than a dilapidated treehouse. It was the key to uncovering a fortune worth millions of dollars. What had started as a joke now felt like a divine gift, a hidden treasure waiting to be discovered. The townspeople who had mocked him would soon eat their words. Michael Thompson, the quiet veteran, was about to uncover a secret that would change his life forever. As Michael stood in the dim light of the treehouse, holding the old wooden box in his hands, his heart raced with anticipation. He had just discovered something that could change his life forever. The photographs, the letters, and the details hidden inside the box were all pointing towards something unimaginable. It wasn't just a treehouse, it was a treasure waiting to be uncovered, a relic from a forgotten past. The realization hit him like a flood. His inheritance wasn't worthless. It was priceless. With a newfound determination, Michael decided to dive deeper into the mystery. He spent the next few days carefully combing through the old documents. The more he read, the clearer the picture became. His late uncle, a man with a history of secrecy, had been involved in something far bigger than anyone had known. The documents detailed the ownership of the property and its ties to a hidden fortune, an estate once owned by a wealthy family with a legacy of collecting rare artifacts, antiques, and treasures from around the world. Michael felt the weight of the discovery. This wasn't just about fixing up an old house. It was about uncovering a piece of history and potentially a fortune that had been lost for decades. The next step was clear. He had to find out exactly where the treasure was hidden. Armed with the documents, Michael began exploring the treehouse more thoroughly, paying close attention to every corner and crevice. He started with the floorboards, which seemed to hold a sense of mystery that he couldn't quite shake. After hours of searching, he found another hidden compartment, this time beneath a section of the floor that appeared to be in worse condition than the rest. Using a crowbar, he pried up the boards, revealing a hidden space underneath. Inside, there was a large, dust-covered chest. His hands shook as he reached for the chest, pulling it into the light. The chest was heavy, made of solid wood with intricate carvings on the surface, and sealed with a large iron lock. Michael's mind raced. Could this be it? The treasure he had read about in the letters? He didn't hesitate. He grabbed the old key he had found earlier and unlocked the chest. As the lid creaked open, Michael was stunned. Inside, he found stacks of old papers, some wrapped in twine, others tied with red ribbons. At the very top of the chest, there was an antique ledger, its pages yellowed with age. As he flipped through the ledger, Michael's breath caught in his throat. The entries in the book detailed transactions, names, and properties tied to his uncle's estate. But the most shocking part was the last entry, a note that indicated a hidden vault beneath the treehouse itself. The vault was mentioned in passing, almost as if it were an afterthought, but Michael knew this was the key to unlocking the full mystery. He had to find that vault. He spent the next few days searching the area around the treehouse, following the clues that the ledger had provided. The more he searched, the more he realized that the vault wasn't just buried in the ground. It was integrated into the very structure of the treehouse. It took hours of careful investigation, but eventually, Michael discovered a hidden door disguised as part of the treehouse's wall. The door was small, almost hidden from view, and sealed with a combination lock. Michael's heart raced as he tried the numbers from the ledger, holding his breath with every click. When the lock finally clicked open, he pushed the door open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the earth. It was pitch dark below, but Michael didn't hesitate. He grabbed a flashlight and descended into the unknown. The staircase led to a small underground chamber, its walls lined with wooden shelves filled with jars, books, and strange artifacts. The air was thick with dust, but it was the objects on the shelves that caught Michael's attention. There were piles of old coins, some gold and some silver, all stacked in neat rows. But it was the large, ornate box at the center of the room that drew his eyes. It was locked with another heavy iron clasp, and as Michael approached, he could feel the weight of it in the air. The box seemed to call to him. His fingers trembled as he opened it, and what he found inside took his breath away. The box was filled with more than just coins. It held a fortune in precious gems, rare artifacts, and documents detailing a series of land deals and investments that had been made long ago. Michael knew instantly that this was no ordinary inheritance. This was a treasure worth millions of dollars, hidden for generations. The mockery he had faced from the townspeople now felt like a distant memory. Michael had uncovered the secret they had all overlooked. The treehouse, once considered worthless, was the key to a fortune that could change everything. His life would never be the same again. As Michael stood in the dimly lit underground chamber, surrounded by stacks of coins, rare artifacts, and priceless documents, the weight of what he had discovered began to sink in. He had found more than just a hidden fortune. He had uncovered a legacy that had been buried for decades, left untouched by the hands of time. The treehouse, once a symbol of mockery and disdain, had transformed into a treasure trove that held secrets beyond his wildest dreams. But as Michael took in the gravity of his discovery, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone in this. There had to be someone else who knew about the treasure, someone who had hidden it away all those years ago. He couldn't help but wonder how many others had come close to uncovering it, only to be thwarted by the same faded clues that had eluded him for so long. As Michael sat down to sift through the documents in the box, one paper caught his eye. It was a letter written in elegant handwriting, dated several decades ago. It was addressed to someone named Nathaniel Blackwood, a name that struck a chord in Michael's memory. He had heard that name before, in passing, as if it were tied to the history of the land. The letter spoke of a secret vault hidden beneath the treehouse, a vault that contained not only treasures, but also the key to a great fortune tied to the land itself. Michael's heart raced as he read the letter. It confirmed his suspicions. Someone had gone to great lengths to keep this treasure hidden, and it wasn't just about wealth. It was about power, influence, and the control of something much larger than just a piece of property. He felt a growing sense of responsibility. The treasure he had found was not just his. It belonged to something much greater. The history of the Blackwood family, the legacy they had left behind, was now in his hands. As Michael carefully examined the other documents, he realized that the vault was part of a much larger network of hidden assets spread across the region. The Blackwood family had been involved in land deals and investments that spanned decades, but these records were carefully hidden to ensure that no one could trace the full extent of their wealth. The treasure was not just about gold or jewels. It was about control over land and resources, a power that could reshape the future. But with that power came responsibility. Michael knew he couldn't keep the treasure to himself. He needed to find out who else was involved in this mystery. He had no idea who Nathaniel Blackwood was, but the letter hinted at a long-forgotten family feud that had led to the treasure being hidden away. There were others out there, people who might want to claim what he had just uncovered. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that this was no ordinary inheritance. It wasn't just about a treehouse and some buried treasure. It was about a legacy that had been fought over for generations. Michael knew he had to protect what he had found, but he also knew that he couldn't do it alone. As he made his way back to the treehouse, Michael's thoughts turned to the townspeople who had mocked him. They had seen him as a fool, someone who had inherited nothing but a crumbling shack. But they were wrong. They didn't know what he had uncovered, what he was now responsible for. He couldn't blame them for their doubts. After all, he had once shared those same feelings. But now, Michael was certain. The treehouse had never been worthless. It had always been a part of something much bigger. He needed to find out more about Nathaniel Blackwood and the legacy that had been left behind. As he dug deeper into the papers and the history of the Blackwood family, Michael uncovered more than just secrets. He uncovered a battle for power, for control, and for the future of the land. The treasure wasn't just about money. It was about legacy, and it was now up to him to protect it. The deeper he dug, the more he realized that his life would never be the same again. He had inherited not just a fortune, but a responsibility that came with it. The town might have mocked him, but in the end, Michael would prove that they were the ones who had underestimated him. The real treasure wasn't just what was hidden beneath the treehouse. It was the power he now held, and the choices he would have to make. Michael wasn't just a man who had inherited a worthless property. He was the keeper of a legacy, and it was up to him to decide how that legacy would unfold. Michael had always known that there was more to the treehouse than anyone had ever realized. But as he continued to unearth its secrets, he began to understand that the stakes were much higher than he had ever imagined. The documents and artifacts he had discovered in the hidden vault told a story far older and far more complex than he could have guessed. The Blackwood family's legacy was not just about wealth. It was about power, control, and secrets that had been passed down through generations. Michael felt the weight of that responsibility pressed down on him. His discovery had set him on a path, and now there was no turning back. The treasure he had uncovered was no longer just a collection of rare artifacts and gold coins. It was a key to a hidden network of power and influence. The more Michael delved into the history of the Blackwood family, the more he realized that his late uncle had been part of something much larger, something that had been carefully concealed for decades. The clues in the vault had led him to more documents, more hidden compartments, and more unanswered questions. But the deeper he went, the more he realized that the truth wasn't just buried in the past. It was still alive, and it was still dangerous. As Michael pieced together the story of the Blackwood family, he learned about the bitter feud that had divided them. Nathaniel Blackwood, the man whose name appeared on the letter he had found earlier, had been the patriarch of the family. But his death had sparked a power struggle among his children, each one vying for control of the family fortune. The treasure hidden beneath the treehouse had been part of a larger scheme to keep the family's wealth and power out of the wrong hands. Michael now knew that his uncle had been trying to protect this secret from those who would use it for their own gain. But as he read through the final pages of the ledger, Michael realized that he wasn't the only one who knew about the treasure. There were others, people who had been watching him, waiting for the right moment to strike. And with every step Michael took toward uncovering the truth, he was becoming more and more of a target. He couldn't trust anyone. The town, once a place of quiet familiarity, now seemed like a web of secrets and lies. Michael had to move quickly. He knew that the treasure was still out there, hidden somewhere on the land, and he was determined to find it before anyone else did. But as he made his way back to the treehouse, a sense of unease settled over him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being followed. Every time he looked over his shoulder, there was no one there, but the feeling remained. As Michael prepared for his next search, he couldn't help but wonder what he had gotten himself into. The deeper he went, the more dangerous it became. He had inherited more than just a treehouse. He had inherited a battle for control of the past, present, and future, and there was no telling who would come out on top. He had to be careful every step of the way. But Michael was a veteran, a man who had faced down more dangerous situations than this. He would not back down. Not now. Not when he was so close to uncovering the truth. As he stood in front of the treehouse, the wind howled through the branches, and Michael felt a chill run down his spine. It was as if the land itself was warning him, urging him to be cautious. But he had come too far to turn back. The secrets of the Blackwood family were buried beneath this land, and Michael was determined to find them. He stepped forward, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. The treasure was close. He could feel it in the air. But as he began his search, the wind shifted, and a strange sound echoed through the trees. It was a faint noise, almost like a whisper, but there was no one around. Michael froze, his instincts kicking in. Something wasn't right. He listened carefully, trying to pinpoint the source of the sound. But there was only silence. The whisper faded, and Michael was left standing alone in the darkness, wondering what had just happened. He couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone, that someone or something was watching him. The treehouse had been a symbol of mockery, a worthless relic to everyone else. But to Michael, it was now a symbol of something far greater, a legacy, a secret, and a power that had been hidden away for far too long. As the night fell, and the temperature dropped, Michael knew that he had to continue his search. The answers were out there, waiting for him to uncover them. And with each step he took, he could feel the weight of the Blackwood family's legacy pressing down on him. This was no longer just about finding a treasure. It was about claiming the power that had been hidden beneath the treehouse all these years. Michael's heart raced as he descended deeper into the treehouse's hidden vault. The whispers of the wind still echoed in his ears, but now, they seemed to carry a more ominous tone, as if the land itself was warning him of something he had yet to uncover. The treasure he had found was no longer just a collection of valuable items. It was a part of something much bigger, a story of hidden power that had been passed down through generations. As Michael stood at the entrance of the underground vault, he couldn't shake the feeling that the past was closing in on him. The air was thick with the weight of history, and every step he took seemed to stir the shadows of the Blackwood family's legacy. The Blackwoods had been a family of secrets, and now, it was his turn to unravel them. The question that plagued Michael was simple. Who else knew about this treasure, and why had it been hidden for so long? As he carefully examined the documents in the vault, his fingers brushed against an old, leather-bound journal. The cover was worn with age, but the pages inside were still intact. He could tell by the writing that it belonged to Nathaniel Blackwood himself, the patriarch of the family. Michael felt a chill run down his spine as he began to read. The journal detailed the origins of the Blackwood fortune and the family's rise to power. It spoke of investments in land, in businesses, and in the most rare and valuable artifacts the world had ever seen. But it also spoke of the darker side of the family's legacy, betrayal, deceit, and a bloodline torn apart by greed. Nathaniel had hidden the true extent of the family's wealth, ensuring that only those who were worthy would ever find it. Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of awe as he read. The treasure he had uncovered was not just about money or artifacts. It was about legacy, control, and the power to shape the future. The more he read, the more he realized that this treasure wasn't just a windfall. It was a responsibility. Blackwood's wasn't just about wealth. It was about protecting what was hidden and ensuring that it wasn't used for evil. As he stood there, holding the journal in his hands, Michael felt the pull of the past and the promise of the future. The treasure had the power to change everything, but it also had the power to destroy. Michael's mind was made up. He would protect the treasure, just as his uncle had intended. He would keep the Blackwood legacy safe and ensure that it didn't fall into the wrong hands. But as he turned to leave the vault, he heard a faint noise, a creak of wood, a rustle in the air. He froze, his instincts kicking in. He wasn't alone. Someone had found him. Someone who was watching, waiting for the right moment to claim what was rightfully theirs. Michael's heart pounded in his chest as he turned, searching for the source of the sound. But the room was empty, the shadows still and silent. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being followed, that the secrets he had uncovered were being watched by someone who was just as determined to find the treasure as he was. The danger was far from over. The battle for the Blackwood fortune had only just begun. Michael stood frozen in the dim light of the vault, his heartbeat echoing in the stillness. The air felt thick, oppressive, as if the very walls were closing in on him. He had felt the presence, a faint rustle, a shift in the air that spoke of something, or someone, lurking just beyond his vision. For a moment, he considered the possibility that his mind was playing tricks on him. After all, the treasure, the secrets, the family legacy, it was all too much for one man to process. But Michael wasn't one to jump at shadows. He trusted his instincts, and right now, his instincts were telling him he was not alone. He took a deep breath and steadied himself. The vault, now a chamber of secrets and buried power, held more than just the riches that had once been hidden here. It held a promise of something much larger, something that, if in the wrong hands, could change everything. The Blackwood legacy was no longer just about wealth. It was about control, about protecting the knowledge of the past, and about ensuring that those who sought to claim it were worthy. Michael was beginning to understand the full weight of the responsibility that had been thrust upon him. He had inherited a treasure, yes, but it came with a duty. The letters he had uncovered, the journal from Nathaniel Blackwood, had hinted at something much darker, a force within the Blackwood family that had been driven by greed, ambition, and betrayal. Michael knew that he was now part of that story. The thought that someone was watching him didn't help calm his nerves. He glanced around the room once more, the eerie silence pressing down on him like a vice. The vault had been a sanctuary, but it was no longer just a hiding place for gold and artifacts. It was a battleground. The battle for the Blackwood fortune had begun, and Michael was standing at the center of it. With a final glance at the stack of papers on the table, Michael turned and made his way out of the vault. He needed answers, and the only way to get them was to confront the people who had been watching him. He wasn't sure who they were yet, but he had a feeling they had been following him for a while. The wind outside howled through the trees as Michael emerged from the treehouse and stepped into the night. The forest was quiet, the only sound the creaking of branches as the wind passed through them. He pulled his coat tighter around him, his breath visible in the cold air. He knew that every step he took now would bring him closer to the truth and to the danger that awaited him. As he walked along the winding path, Michael's thoughts turned to the people in the town. They had mocked him, laughed at him for inheriting what they had called a worthless treehouse. But they didn't know what he had uncovered, what he was now carrying with him. They didn't know the power he held, the legacy he had inherited. And soon, they would know. Michael's mind raced as he walked, his footsteps quickening with each passing moment. The vault, the documents, the treasure, they were only part of the story. The real story was in the land itself, in the history that had been hidden for so long. Michael knew he needed to find the missing pieces, the ones that would explain everything. As he reached the edge of the forest, Michael paused. In the distance, he saw a faint light flickering in the distance. It was a small cabin, tucked away behind the trees. He didn't recognize it, but something told him he needed to go there. Without hesitation, he made his way toward the light, his footsteps crunching softly in the snow. As he approached the cabin, Michael's senses heightened. He wasn't sure why, but he had a feeling that the answers he was seeking were inside. He knocked on the door, and a few moments later, it opened. An older man stood in the doorway, his face weathered with age, his eyes sharp with a knowledge that seemed to pierce right through Michael. "I've been expecting you," the man said, his voice calm but firm. Michael didn't know what to say. He had never seen this man before, yet somehow, he felt like he knew him. There was something familiar about him, something that spoke of the past, of secrets that had been hidden away for too long. "Come in," the man said, stepping aside to let Michael enter. Inside, the cabin was warm, the flickering light of a fire casting long shadows on the walls. The man motioned to a chair by the fire. "You've uncovered something, haven't you?" he asked, his eyes never leaving Michael's. Michael nodded slowly, still unsure of what was happening. "You know about the Blackwood fortune, don't you?" the man continued. "It's not just about treasure. It's about a family's legacy. A legacy that has been buried for too long." Michael's heart skipped a beat. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with uncertainty. The man smiled softly, almost knowingly. "I'm someone who's been watching over this land for a long time. I'm here to help you understand what's at stake." Michael sat down, his mind racing. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when the truth would finally come to light. But as the man spoke, Michael realized that the truth was far more complicated than he had ever imagined. The treasure, the Blackwood legacy, it was just the beginning. There was more to the story, much more. Michael sat in the small, dimly lit cabin, his mind racing. The man who had opened the door to him seemed to know more than he was letting on, his calm demeanor and cryptic words only deepening the mystery surrounding the Blackwood fortune. The fire crackled in the corner of the room, casting flickering shadows across the walls, but Michael could not focus on the warmth. His thoughts were consumed with the secrets he had uncovered, and the unsettling feeling that the true story was still far from revealed. "You've uncovered something, haven't you?" the man asked, his voice low and steady. Michael nodded, still unsure of how to respond. He didn't know this man, yet somehow, the stranger seemed familiar, as if they were bound by something unseen, something bigger than both of them. "It's not just treasure, you know," the man continued, leaning forward slightly. "It's a legacy, a dangerous legacy, one that has been hidden for a reason." Michael's heart skipped a beat. He had felt something from the very beginning, a growing sense of unease, but now the words made it clear. This wasn't just about money or power. It was about something far darker. "A legacy?" Michael repeated, his voice a little shaky. "What do you mean?" The man's eyes, sharp and calculating, seemed to weigh him before he spoke again. "The Blackwood fortune was never meant to be discovered. Your uncle knew that, which is why he kept it hidden. But there are others who have been waiting for someone to come along and open the door to what has been buried for generations." Michael felt a chill spread through him. He had never known his uncle very well, but from what he had learned, his uncle had always been a man of integrity. Yet, this new information painted a very different picture. It seemed that the fortune had been hidden not only to protect the family, but to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. "Who are these people?" Michael asked, his voice almost a whisper. "The ones who've been waiting?" The man paused, his gaze shifting to the fire. "They are the descendants of those who built the fortune. They've always known about it. And now, they are ready to reclaim what was lost. You may think that you are the rightful heir to the Blackwood legacy, but the truth is, there are those who will do anything to ensure that the power doesn't stay in the hands of someone like you." Michael felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The weight of the situation was becoming clearer with every word. This was no longer just about uncovering a hidden fortune. It was about survival. "What do you want from me?" Michael asked, the words feeling heavy on his tongue. "I'm just trying to understand what's happening." The man sighed, as if weighing whether or not to reveal more. "You're not the first to stumble upon the treasure, and you won't be the last. But what separates you from the others is that you've found the key. You've opened the vault. The Blackwood family's legacy is tied to this land, and if you want to keep it safe, you need to understand the power it holds." Michael's mind was reeling. The Blackwood legacy was tied to the land? The more he heard, the more it seemed that this was not just about wealth. It was about influence, control, and something far more dangerous. "What happens if I don't protect it?" Michael asked, feeling the weight of the question. The man's gaze hardened. "Then it will fall into the wrong hands. And those who seek to control it will stop at nothing to get what they want. The treasure you found is just the beginning. The true power is hidden elsewhere, and it is far more dangerous than you realize." Michael stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. His heart was pounding, and his head was spinning. "So, what am I supposed to do now?" he asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. "How do I protect something I don't even understand?" The man stood up slowly, his movements deliberate. "You have no choice but to trust yourself, Michael. You've already stepped into this world. The moment you found the vault, You became part of something much bigger. Now, you must decide how far you're willing to go to protect it. But be warned, there are those who are already on their way to take what's yours. They'll come for the land, for the power. And if you're not ready, they'll take it without a second thought. Michael's mind was racing. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, but the picture that emerged was far from what he had expected. The Blackwood fortune was not just a treasure. It was a powerful, dangerous force that could reshape the future of the land. And there were people willing to kill to claim it. As the man's words echoed in his mind, Michael knew one thing for certain. He couldn't let the legacy fall into the wrong hands. But with each step he took, the danger only grew. The shadows were closing in, and Michael had no choice but to face them head-on. The Blackwood legacy was his now, but at what cost? Michael felt the weight of the man's words pressing down on him. The fire in the cabin had dimmed to a flickering glow, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch across the walls, mirroring the growing uncertainty in his mind. The man had given him a choice, but Michael wasn't sure he was ready to make it. He had inherited the Blackwood fortune, but what did it truly mean? Was it a gift or a curse? His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the edge of the chair. He had thought the treasure was a way out of the loneliness he had carried with him since returning from the war. But now, it felt like the beginning of something much darker. You have no choice but to trust yourself, the man's voice echoed in his mind. You've already stepped into this world. Now, you must decide how far you're willing to go to protect it. Michael knew that the stakes were higher than he had ever imagined. The Blackwood legacy was tied to power, and that power was coveted by others, people who would stop at nothing to claim it. He had already seen the darkness in the eyes of those who sought the treasure, and if he wasn't careful, they would come for him next. The thought of it made his skin crawl. The man had warned him. There are those who are already on their way to take what's yours. They'll come for the land, for the power. And if you're not ready, they'll take it without a second thought. Michael stood up, feeling a surge of energy flood his veins. He couldn't back down. Not now. He had been a soldier once, and soldiers didn't run from danger, they faced it head-on. The Blackwood fortune had been hidden for a reason, and now that it was in his hands, it was his responsibility to protect it. He wasn't going to let anyone take what he had uncovered. As he stepped out into the cold night air, Michael felt the weight of his decision. The legacy of the Blackwood family was his now, but at what cost? The wind howled through the trees, as if the land itself was calling to him, urging him to take action. Michael couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. It was like a presence just beyond his reach, lurking in the shadows. He didn't know who it was, but he knew they were close. His footsteps crunched in the snow as he made his way toward the treehouse. The place that had once been a symbol of mockery was now a fortress. The treasure, the documents, and the journal, all of it was hidden there, waiting to be protected. But Michael had learned that there was more to the story. As he approached the treehouse, his instincts were on high alert. He could feel the tension in the air, the sense that something, or someone, was watching him. He wasn't alone. Michael stepped inside, the familiar scent of wood and earth filling his senses. He had spent countless hours in this place, repairing, uncovering, and now protecting. But tonight felt different. The quiet was deafening, and the darkness seemed to be closing in on him. His hand instinctively reached for the journal, which had become his lifeline to the Blackwood family's secrets. He had to know more. He needed to understand what he was protecting. As he flipped through the pages, he found a new entry, one he hadn't noticed before. It was dated several years before his uncle's death. The words were frantic, almost desperate. "They're coming," it read. "I can feel it. They know about the vault, about the treasure. If you find this, you must protect it at all costs. The family has been torn apart by greed and betrayal, and they will stop at nothing to reclaim what was stolen from them. Trust no one. The Blackwood fortune is a weapon. It's power, and it's dangerous. Keep it hidden. Keep it safe." Michael's heart raced as he read the words. The warning was clear. The Blackwood legacy was not just a treasure, it was a weapon, and there were people who would kill to wield that power. His uncle had known this. He had hidden the treasure for a reason, and now, it was up to Michael to protect it. But how? Who could he trust? As the wind picked up outside, Michael's thoughts turned to the man in the cabin, the one who had known about the Blackwood legacy before Michael had even discovered it. What did he want? Was he a friend or a foe? Michael didn't know the answers, but he knew one thing. He had to act fast. The longer he waited, the closer his enemies would get. The Blackwood family had been built on lies, secrets, and betrayal. And now, Michael was caught in the middle of it all. The choice had been made for him. He had inherited the legacy, and now, he had to fight to protect it. As he stood there in the treehouse, surrounded by the past, Michael knew that the battle was just beginning. The treasure, the land, the power, they were all at stake. And he would stop at nothing to protect it. But with every move he made, the danger grew. The Blackwood legacy was a force that could change everything, and Michael was its last line of defense. The wind howled outside, but inside the treehouse, Michael knew that there was no turning back. The fight for the Blackwood fortune had begun. Michael could feel the weight of the Blackwood legacy growing heavier with every passing minute. He had thought that uncovering the treasure hidden beneath the treehouse would bring him peace, but instead, it had opened the door to a world of danger and uncertainty. The man from the cabin had been right. This was no simple inheritance. The Blackwood fortune was more than just a collection of riches. It was a symbol of power, a key to control, and a magnet for those who would stop at nothing to claim it. The land, the treasure, the legacy, it was all at risk. And Michael was now its protector. As he sat in the treehouse, the faint creaking of the wood around him seemed to echo the thoughts running through his mind. He had to be ready for whatever was coming. The man's warning still echoed in his head. The Blackwood fortune is a weapon. It's power, and it's dangerous. The question was no longer whether Michael was worthy of the inheritance. It was whether he could survive the battle for it. He knew there were people out there who had been watching him, waiting for the right moment to strike. He had felt their presence before, lurking in the shadows, just beyond his reach. Michael wasn't a man who liked to wait for danger to come to him. He would seek it out first. The treasure wasn't just about wealth. It was about control. Whoever held it could change the course of history, and Michael knew that the wrong hands could destroy everything. He had spent too long being overlooked, too long living in the shadows. Now, he was in the light, and he wasn't going to let anyone take it from him. He had made up his mind. The first thing he needed was information. The man in the cabin had given him a piece of the puzzle, but Michael knew that there was more to the story. The Blackwood family history was filled with dark secrets, and it was time to uncover them. Michael spent the next few days combing through every document, every letter, and every photograph he had found. He had already discovered the key to the vault, but now he needed to understand what the vault truly contained. The more he read, the more he uncovered. The Blackwoods had been involved in secret dealings, hidden alliances, and dark politics. The family had once been powerful, but it was their thirst for power that had ultimately torn them apart. The treasure, Michael realized, was not just a fortune, it was a symbol of that power. And now, it was his responsibility to protect it. But as he delved deeper into the past, Michael uncovered something that made his blood run cold. There were others, just like him, who had inherited pieces of the Blackwood fortune. But these other heirs were not interested in protecting the legacy. They wanted to control it, to use it for their own gain. They had been working in the shadows for years, plotting to reclaim what they believed was rightfully theirs. Michael had thought he was alone in this battle, but now he knew that he wasn't. The Blackwood fortune had become a battleground, and he was in the center of it. He couldn't do this alone. He needed help, and he needed it fast. But who could he trust? Michael had already learned that people weren't always what they seemed. He had been betrayed by those closest to him before, and he wasn't about to make the same mistake again. As he prepared to leave the treehouse and seek out the allies he would need, Michael felt the weight of the decision bearing down on him. The Blackwood fortune was a dangerous thing, and whoever controlled it had the power to shape the future. He had no choice but to protect it. The legacy of the Blackwood family wasn't just about wealth, it was about survival. Michael was ready for whatever came next. But as he stepped outside into the crisp evening air, he couldn't shake the feeling that the danger was closer than ever before. Someone, or something, was watching him. The battle for the Blackwood fortune had only just begun, and Michael was about to face his greatest challenge yet. Michael stood at the edge of the dense forest, the wind biting at his face as it swept through the tall trees. The air felt heavy, thick with the weight of his decisions, and the realization that things were spiraling faster than he could control. The Blackwood fortune, once a mystery, now loomed over him like an insurmountable mountain. He knew that the battle for control was far from over. But the question still lingered in his mind. Who could he trust? He had always been a man of solitude, someone who relied on his own instincts and strength to get by. But this was different. The stakes were too high, the danger too real. As he walked through the forest, his thoughts drifted back to the man in the cabin, the one who had warned him about the others who sought the treasure. Michael's hands tightened into fists as he thought about the words the man had spoken. There are those who will stop at nothing to get what's yours. The legacy of the Blackwoods wasn't just about wealth. It was about power, and power was something that attracted people willing to kill to control it. Michael wasn't sure who those people were yet, but he could feel their presence, like a shadow trailing him. Every step he took seemed to echo with the weight of the responsibility now thrust upon him. The treasure, the power, it wasn't just his to keep. It was a burden, one that came with enemies and threats from every direction. He had been underestimated before, but not anymore. As he made his way toward town, Michael could feel the eyes of the town on him, watching from every corner. He had been mocked, laughed at for inheriting a worthless treehouse. But now the tables had turned. He knew that if anyone in town had any idea of the treasure he had uncovered, they would all be circling like vultures. Trust was a commodity he could no longer afford. Every face he saw now held a hidden agenda. Michael had no illusions about the people around him. He had spent enough time in the military to know that loyalty was rare and betrayal was common. The question now was simple. Who among them could he trust to help him keep the Blackwood fortune safe? And who would turn on him the moment they smelled power? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps crunching in the snow behind him. Instinctively, Michael tensed, reaching for the pistol at his side. He turned quickly, his hand ready, but it was only Sarah. She stood there, her expression unreadable, her dark eyes scanning him with the same quiet intensity that had always marked her presence. Michael relaxed slightly, but only slightly. He had known Sarah for years, and in some ways, he trusted her more than anyone else. But trust, like everything else in this new world he was stepping into, was now a dangerous thing. "You've been busy," Sarah said quietly, her voice almost lost in the howling wind. "I heard about the vault." Michael's jaw tightened. Of course, she knew. The whole town was probably gossiping about him by now. He had underestimated how quickly word would spread. "I'm not sure what you're talking about," Michael said, trying to keep his voice even. "The vault. The Blackwood legacy," Sarah pressed, her eyes narrowing as she stepped closer. "You found something, haven't you?" Michael studied her for a long moment. He had always known Sarah to be sharp, observant, but he had never known her to dig into other people's business. Still, the way she was looking at him told him that she already knew more than she was letting on. "What's your angle, Sarah?" Michael asked, his voice hardening. Sarah didn't flinch. "My angle?" She shook her head slowly. "I'm not the one with the treasure, but I know what's at stake here. I've seen the way people look at you now. You've got something they want, and they're going to come after you for it. I'm here to help you." Michael studied her, weighing her words carefully. He wasn't ready to trust anyone fully, but something about Sarah's calm demeanor made him hesitate. He had never known her to lie, but in times like these, even the truth could be dangerous. "Why should I trust you?" Michael finally asked, his voice low. Sarah met his gaze without hesitation. "Because I know what it's like to have everything taken from you. I've seen what greed can do to people. If you're going to protect what you've found, you're going to need help." Michael felt the weight of her words settle deep in his chest. He didn't want to trust anyone, but he knew that this battle was too big for him to fight alone. There were too many unknowns, too many people out there who were after the same thing. "You know more than you're letting on," Michael said quietly, stepping closer to her. "Who else is involved in this? Who else wants the treasure?" Sarah's eyes flickered with something Michael couldn't quite read. "I don't know all the details," she said, her voice tight, "but I know enough. There are people you haven't even thought of yet. People with power. People who won't stop until they get what they want. If you're not careful, they'll destroy everything." Michael's mind raced. The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't just about a hidden fortune. It was about power, corruption, and a fight for control that had been going on for generations. And now, Michael was in the middle of it. The weight of the Blackwood legacy pressed down on him harder than ever, and he knew that if he didn't act quickly, it would slip through his fingers. Sarah stepped back, her eyes never leaving his. "I'm in," she said simply. "But you have to trust me." Michael hesitated for a moment, then nodded. The road ahead was uncertain, and the dangers were real, but he knew one thing. He wasn't alone anymore. Together, they would face whatever came next. The battle for the Blackwood fortune had just begun, and Michael was ready to fight for it, no matter the cost. Michael stood with Sarah in the stillness of the night, the air thick with the weight of their unspoken agreement. The wind had died down, but the world felt heavier somehow, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The Blackwood fortune, which had once seemed like a distant mystery, was now the center of his world, and he couldn't shake the feeling that things were moving too fast, too dangerously. The man from the cabin had warned him that the battle was just beginning. Michael knew that he was no longer just a man searching for treasure. He was a player in a high-stakes game where the rules were still being written. The weight of responsibility pressed on his shoulders, but he couldn't afford to show weakness. He had to be strong for both himself and the legacy he had inherited. As they walked through the cold night toward the town, Sarah kept a close watch on their surroundings. The silence was broken only by the crunch of their boots in the snow. Michael had never been one to trust easily, but something in Sarah's steady demeanor reassured him. She was a survivor, just like him. And now, they were bound by something much greater than friendship, something that neither of them could escape. "We need to move fast," Michael said, his voice low. "The longer we wait, the more likely it is that someone else will find out what we've discovered." Sarah nodded, her eyes scanning the shadows. "I know. We can't let this fall into the wrong hands." The weight of her words hung in the air between them. Michael knew that it wasn't just about keeping the treasure safe. It was about ensuring that the power it represented didn't end up in the wrong hands. He had already seen how easily greed and ambition could tear a family apart, and he wasn't about to let that happen to him. As they entered the town, the familiar streets now felt foreign to Michael. The faces of the townspeople seemed different, almost hostile. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were all watching him, waiting for him to make a move. The quiet mockery that had once followed him was now replaced by a dangerous silence. The rumors had already started. Michael was sure of it. The treehouse, once a laughingstock, was now the epicenter of whispers. But he didn't have time to worry about the town's perception of him. There were bigger things at stake. "We need to find out who's been looking into the Blackwood legacy," Michael said, his eyes narrowed. "There's more to this than just the treasure. Whoever is after it knows exactly what they're doing." Sarah's eyes flicked toward the shadows. Her voice barely a whisper. "I've heard things. People have been asking questions. It's not just the treasure they want. It's the power." Michael stopped in his tracks, his mind racing. "What do you mean?" Sarah hesitated before speaking again. The Blackwood family was involved in more than just land deals and investments. They were part of something much bigger, something that could change the course of history. Whoever controls that power controls everything. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. The Blackwood legacy was more than just a fortune, it was a weapon. And he had the key. He wasn't sure who he could trust anymore, but he knew one thing. He couldn't let this fall into the wrong hands. "We need to find out who else is looking for the legacy," Michael said, his voice steady but filled with determination. "And we need to make sure they don't get to it first." As they made their way through the town, Michael's mind was a whirl of thoughts. He couldn't stop wondering who else was involved in this dangerous game. Who had been watching him? Who knew what he had uncovered? The more he thought about it, the more he realized that this was bigger than just a family legacy. It was about control, power, and influence. Whoever had been involved in hiding the treasure had done so for a reason. They knew the true cost of what they were protecting. "We'll need to move quickly," Sarah said, breaking through his thoughts. "But we can't do this alone. We need to find allies, people who can help us uncover the truth." Michael looked at her, his face set with resolve. "We don't have time for allies. We need to act fast, and we need to act alone." Sarah raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Michael's decision was made. He wasn't about to rely on anyone else. This was his fight, his legacy to protect. And if he had to face it alone, then so be it. As they approached the edge of town, Michael's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glancing at the message that had just come through. It was from an unknown number. The message was short, cryptic, and chilling. "We know what you found. You can't hide forever." His heart skipped a beat. The message confirmed what he had feared. The people after the Blackwood fortune were close. Too close. And now, they were coming for him. Michael's grip tightened around the phone, his mind racing as he glanced at Sarah. "We need to move. Now." They didn't waste any time. The town that had once felt like home now felt like a trap. As Michael and Sarah hurried through the streets, Michael could feel the eyes on him. He wasn't sure who was watching, but he knew one thing. He was running out of time. The battle for the Blackwood fortune had escalated, and Michael had no choice but to face the threat head-on. The moment of truth was coming, and he couldn't afford to hesitate. His legacy and his life were at stake. Michael and Sarah moved quickly through the quiet town, their footsteps muffled by the freshly fallen snow. The message from the unknown number burned in Michael's mind. "We know what you found. You can't hide forever." The words were simple, but the threat behind them was clear. The people who wanted the Blackwood fortune were closing in. Every step felt heavier than the last, and the weight of the legacy he had inherited pressed down on him like a stone. He wasn't just protecting treasure now. He was protecting something far more dangerous: power. The power to change lives, to reshape history, and the power to destroy everything he had worked for. He glanced over at Sarah, her eyes scanning the shadows, always alert. She had been by his side through the worst of it, but Michael knew that even she couldn't be fully trusted in a game this high stakes. He had learned the hard way that even the closest allies could be enemies in disguise. "We need to find out who's behind this," Michael said, his voice low and urgent. Sarah nodded. "I've been thinking the same thing. Whoever's coming for you knows exactly what you have. They'll be watching every move you make." Michael clenched his jaw. He had no time to waste. "We need to go to the treehouse now." As they approached the outskirts of the town, Michael's pulse quickened. The Blackwood treehouse, once a symbol of mockery and ridicule, now stood as the last line of defense. It was where the treasure was hidden, where the secrets were buried, and it was where the battle for the Blackwood fortune would unfold. They reached the treehouse just as the sun began to set, the sky a mix of orange and purple, casting long shadows across the snow. The cold air bit at their faces, but Michael barely noticed. He had been through worse. The wind carried with it a sense of foreboding, the trees creaking as if they too were waiting for something to happen. Michael stepped inside the treehouse, Sarah right behind him. The place was quiet, too quiet. The familiar smell of wood and dust hung in the air, but there was an eerie stillness that made the hairs on the back of Michael's neck stand up. He moved to the hidden compartment where he had stored the journal, the papers, and the key to the Blackwood fortune. But as he reached for it, something stopped him. A shadow crossed the doorway. Someone was here. Michael's hand hovered over the box, his breath catching in his chest. The intruder was close, and he knew there was no way to hide the treasure now. The battle had begun. "Get ready," Michael whispered to Sarah, his voice barely audible over the wind outside. Sarah nodded, her eyes narrowing with determination. She reached for her gun, always prepared, always alert. Michael's fingers wrapped around the journal, the weight of it comforting him, reminding him of why he was here. He had to protect it. The door creaked, and Michael tensed. The figure stepped into the treehouse, tall and imposing. A man, dressed in black, his face obscured by a hood. Michael's instincts kicked in. This wasn't just a trespasser. It was someone who knew exactly what he was after. "You've got what I want," the man said, his voice low and steady. "Hand it over, and I'll make this easy for you." Michael's grip on the journal tightened. He had heard enough. This was it, the moment he had been dreading. He knew the man wasn't here for a simple conversation. "You're not getting anything," Michael replied, his voice cold and defiant. "Not without a fight." The man chuckled darkly, stepping further into the room. "You really think you can stop me?" Sarah raised her gun, aiming directly at the man's chest. "I don't think we have much of a choice, do we?" The man froze, his eyes flickering to the gun in Sarah's hand. Michael stepped forward, his voice unwavering. "Leave now, and you might just make it out alive." The man smirked, clearly unimpressed. "You're out of your depth, friend. This is bigger than you, bigger than both of you." Michael felt the blood rush to his head, the tension building in the small space. "Maybe so," he said, his voice steady, "but I'm not backing down." For a moment, the man said nothing. The two sides stood in silence, the only sound the creaking of the treehouse and the howling wind outside. Then, suddenly, the man lunged forward, faster than Michael had anticipated. Sarah fired, but the man was already moving. The bullet missed. Michael dove to the side, the journal still clutched tightly in his hand. The man grabbed Sarah by the wrist, twisting it painfully. She gasped in pain, but managed to elbow him hard in the stomach. The man staggered back, momentarily stunned. Michael didn't waste the opportunity. He charged forward, tackling the man to the ground. The two of them struggled, rolling on the wooden floor of the treehouse, the sound of fists meeting flesh echoing in the quiet space. Michael's heart pounded in his chest as he fought to hold his own. He was outmatched, but he wasn't going to give up. Not now. Not when everything he had fought for was at stake. With a final, desperate push, Michael knocked the man off of him, scrambling to his feet. Sarah, still breathing heavily, grabbed her gun again, aiming it at the intruder. "Stay down," she commanded. The man glared at them, his chest heaving with anger, but he knew the fight was over. He slowly raised his hands in surrender. "This isn't over," he spat. "You don't understand what you're up against." Michael stood tall, the journal still in his hands. "I understand enough," he said, "and I'll protect it, no matter what." The man scowled but made no further move. Michael knew this was just the beginning. The fight for the Blackwood fortune was far from over, but he was ready to face whatever came next. And whatever the cost, he wasn't going to let anyone take it from him. Michael stood in the quiet of the treehouse, the man he had just fought lying at his feet, staring up at him with a mixture of hate and grudging respect. The adrenaline that had surged through him only moments ago was now replaced with a heavy, suffocating stillness. His hands were shaking, the journal still tightly gripped in his palm, a reminder of everything he had to protect. Sarah stood beside him, her breathing still ragged from the fight. Her eyes never left the intruder, who remained motionless, seemingly realizing the futility of his position. "You'll never win," the man spat, his voice hoarse. "You don't understand what you're up against. The Blackwood legacy doesn't belong to you. It was never meant for people like you." Michael's jaw clenched, his thoughts racing. The words stung, but they didn't shake him. He wasn't here to claim a fortune or prove a point. He was here to protect something far more valuable than gold or jewels. He was here to keep the power hidden and keep the legacy safe from the people who would destroy it. "You don't get to decide who it belongs to," Michael said coldly. "The Blackwood legacy is mine now, and I'll protect it, no matter what it costs." The man's eyes narrowed, his fists clenched at his sides, but he remained silent. Sarah stepped forward, her gun still aimed at him, a clear signal that the fight was far from over if he decided to make a move. "We know who you are," Michael continued, his voice steady. "And we know who you work for. You're not the only one after the treasure. But this ends now. I won't let you use it for your own gain." The man chuckled bitterly, a twisted smile creeping onto his face. "You think you're the only one who can protect it? You've already opened the door. Others are already on their way. You can't stop what's coming. They'll take it from you." Michael's heart sank. He had known this day would come, but hearing it from this man made it real. There was no turning back now. The Blackwood fortune wasn't just a treasure, it was a key to power, and that power was being sought by those who would tear apart everything in their path to claim it. But Michael wasn't going to let that happen. "Then I'll fight them," Michael said, his voice unwavering. "I'll fight every last one of them. This legacy is mine to protect, and I won't let it fall into the wrong hands." The man slowly stood up, wincing as he straightened, his eyes fixed on Michael. "You'll lose," he said softly, "because they're already coming. They know what you've found, and they'll stop at nothing to take it. And when they do, you'll regret ever stepping into this game." The threat hung in the air like a storm cloud, but Michael didn't flinch. His resolve was solid, unbreakable. This wasn't just about the treasure. It was about keeping control, keeping the legacy intact, and making sure that those who came after him wouldn't be able to use it for evil. Michael looked at Sarah, who nodded slightly, her face set in determination. "We'll be ready," she said. "We won't let them win." The man stepped back, raising his hands in mock surrender, but the look in his eyes was cold, calculating. "You'll see. You don't understand the game you're playing. The moment you took the treasure, you signed your own death warrant." With that, he turned and walked out of the treehouse, disappearing into the night, leaving Michael and Sarah to face the daunting future that lay ahead. Michael exhaled slowly, letting the tension in his body slowly release. He didn't know what the next move would be, but he knew one thing. This fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. The Blackwood legacy was his responsibility now, and he would do whatever it took to protect it. As the wind howled outside the treehouse, Michael turned to Sarah. "We need to make our next move," he said. "We can't wait for them to come for us. We have to go to them." Sarah gave him a sharp nod. "Agreed. But we need to be careful. Whoever these people are, they're dangerous. Michael's mind raced. He had been through dangerous situations before, but this was different. This wasn't just about surviving a battle. It was about protecting something that could change the world, something too powerful to fall into the wrong hands. The legacy of the Blackwood family was not just a treasure, it was a weapon, and it was Michael's responsibility to ensure it was never used for evil. As they made their way out of the treehouse and into the night, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that the danger was closing in. But he wasn't afraid. He had come too far, fought too hard, and sacrificed too much to back down now. The battle was far from over, and Michael knew that whatever happened, he would never give up the fight to protect the Blackwood legacy. In this thrilling chapter of veteran stories, we follow Michael, a man who has inherited a seemingly worthless treehouse that holds secrets beyond imagination. As the mystery unfolds, Michael discovers that his inheritance is far more valuable than anyone could have guessed, drawing him into a dangerous battle for a treasure that could change the course of history. As veteran stories often reveal, what starts as a personal journey becomes something much larger, one that forces Michael to confront his past, the legacy of a powerful family, and the people who will stop at nothing to claim the treasure. With his life at risk, Michael is forced to rely on his military instincts to protect what's his, but even he doesn't know who he can trust. From tense confrontations to shocking discoveries, this veteran's journey is one of resilience and survival, as Michael fights to protect the Blackwood fortune and uncover the truth behind his inheritance. As with all great veteran stories, the line between friend and foe becomes blurred, and Michael must navigate treacherous waters to safeguard not just his life, but the future of a legacy worth more than gold. His story is filled with unexpected twists, reminding us all that even in the darkest moments, the strength of a veteran can shine through. This tale is a testament to the courage and determination of those who fight not just for themselves, but for something much greater. With every new revelation, Michael finds himself deeper in the web of family secrets, power struggles, and a fight for survival that only a true veteran could handle. These veteran stories remind us that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not on the battlefield, but in the heart and mind of those who carry the weight of the past and the responsibility of the future.